Hey, Dustin.
Hey, Dustin. All right, so let's get things going here. So yeah, obviously we got the Renegades of Funk Volume 2 going on here. We're going to be enjoying some delicious Campbellton whiskeys from Hazelburn, Springbank, and Longrow. I've got my excuse me, my brother from another mother here, Nick Hardy, here to help with the presentation. He's our resident Springbank nut, and he's going to take us through the funk here. So,
yep,
getting into it here, that's something I know that Nick, you wanted to talk about, the funk.
Oh yes. So just before we start on the history, I want everyone to think about what is funk, because it's called Renegades of Funk. It's the second time we do it. And you read a review, you hear people talk about Springbank, and everyone's like, oh, this one's so good because it's funky. It's got that funky vibe. It's got a Springbank funk. And then you read other reviews. It's like, oh, it's not funky as we like it. But what is funk? What does it mean? What does it mean for you? Should it mean? So I want you to really think about it. And we'll come back when we start talking about the whiskeys in themselves, and we'll try to assess, is it funky? Is it funky enough? And how do you see it being funky? Maybe, Russ, I think you were talking about like singing and doing some 80s vibe, and you were supposed to dress funky, but that didn't go along. I don't know.
Oh, no, I got a costume change coming up.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So yeah, just please everyone think about what's funky for you, what Springbank funk mean, and we'll get into Mike's presentation.
Fantastic. Let's bring that funk. All right. So as we know, this is the second volume of the Renegades of Funk. And in the first volume, we went through the history of the Springbank Distillery. It's up on the screen again, and if you want to read it, by all means, feel free. The long and short of it is, Springbank's been around for a long time. Founded in 1828. They're one of the very, very few Campbellton distilleries that are still running. The history of Campbellton is an interesting one, and I think we've covered it a number of times throughout our tastings. But of course, Campbellton was the largest distilling area in Scotland for a very long time. There's a couple of issues that cropped up over the history, including American prohibition and some very, very questionable investment practices amongst a number of distilleries in Campbellton, and that resulted in almost all of the distilleries being closed in the town. Campbellton went from the largest distillation area to one of the smallest, and now I think there's only 2 or 3 distilleries actually working in Campbellton to this day. Now, luckily, Springbank has 3 brands, and we're going to be getting into those 3 brands. We've got Hazelburn, which is their unpeated distillate. We've got Springbank, which is their slightly peated distillate, and then we've got Longrow, which is their smoky punch in the face. So we can see there that in 1973, it was the first time they did the peated distillation for Longrow. 1997 was the first distillation run for Hazelburn. So that is the latest addition to their line, is the unpeated. So another interesting thing to know about Springbank is they distill their whiskey really, really weird. Most distilleries will do a double distillation. So you get your low wines and you distill it twice, and boom, you got whiskey. A lot of Irish whiskey distillers will do triple distillation, where you distill it 3 times. Springbank has to be a little bit more difficult in how they distill their whiskeys. They've got 3 stills, a direct fired wash still, which is pretty rare these days. Back in the day, all of the stills were direct fire, which means actual fire went on the outside of the copper. Most distilleries these days have switched it up to steam heated stills. But with the wash still, Springbank still goes with the fire. Then they've got their number 1 low wine still. With that, they condense with a worm tub condenser, which is, again, a really old school way of condensing that vapor into liquid distillate. One of the other, actually 2 of the other distilleries out there that still use worm tubs are Craigellachie and Mortlach. The idea is using worm tubs will give you a more powerful distillate, a specific funk to that distillate. So that could be kind of where that funk discussion starts to come from. And then they've got their number 2 low wine still with a tube condenser. In terms of capacity, they're only making 2 million liters per annum, which is a fraction of what the larger Diageo distilleries do, which may explain why the prices are a little out of whack. But that is what it is. So let's. This is Hazelburn here. So whereas Springbank and Longrow are both, I think, what is it, 2.75 times distilled, or 2.5 times distilled. Hazelburn, again, to make things weird and wacky, they actually triple distill it. So again, this is something that is usually done with Irish whiskey and Auchentoshan, oddly enough. So they'll distill it in all 3 of the stills. And they'll get their new make at, as you can see, pretty high ABV, 71 to 75%. So before we get into the rest of the details, we're here to drink whiskey. So let's drink some whiskey. So we're going to start off with the Hazelburn. This is an 11-year-old single cask. Nick, tell me what you want to tell me, buddy.
All right. Well, Hazelburn is the underdog. Few years ago, everyone was Springbank. Then the prices went up, and then everyone was like, "Oh, Longrow." And then the prices went up for the Red Series and stuff, and everyone went, "Oh, Kilkerran," and we're still stuck with Hazelburn. Lots of people actually like Hazelburn, unpeated, but there's always this kind of little peaty aspect to it. It's distilled in the same tubes. It's distilled at the same place. It's stock in barrels, near the Springbank and Longrow barrels. And for me, Hazelburn, unpeated, there's always this kind of vibe, kind of like Old Pulteney, the unpeated stuff, kind of like the Kalila you were talking about, the 18-year-old. It's not peated, yet you still feel a bit of peat. A peated ghost, yeah, well said. I know Russell is a big Hazelburn fan, which is nice. So I have some notes prepared, and I'd like for all of you to interact, please. We're not a big group. There's a lot of very well-educated people. I'm looking at you, Drew and Sheila, about Springbank and whiskey. So I think it would be nice to just please interrupt us. Don't let Myke and I steal the thunder on each other. You need to separate this. So just quick notes from me. Yeah, Bradley, Myke, you had something to say? No?
If I can tell, maybe it's the meaty, grassy aspect of the liquid that bring us to the peaty. We think of Laphroaig or Kalila that make us think that it's like a little bit peaty, but you don't have the peaty aspect, but you have the meaty and grassy. I don't know if I'm clear of what I'm trying to say, but
No,
Oh,
I get exactly
definitely.
what you mean.
Oh yeah,
That's-
you know,
That's a perfect way to describe it.
yeah,
it's like-
exactly.
Walking through a field and you have a buffalo passing you. I don't know why, but that's the exact image that comes into my head.
That's exactly that. You know, on my notes, I have grassy on the nose. It's so grassy. It's like, it's exactly the right word for that. It's bourbony. It's a bit creamy. I feel on the palate, like not creamy, like actual cream or just a thick texture, but like creamy butterscotch.
I get
Strawberries, yeah.
strawberry jam,
Yeah.
like
It-
that
yeah.
bon mama good fruit compote.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very good dram.
Yeah, it's a sweetness that goes all the way around your tongue. Rather than just being right on the front, it feels like it goes underneath and it captures your whole mouth with sweetness.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I think it's very interesting. This is a bourbon hogshead. You could almost say there's a winey finish to it. You know, maybe a sweet wine, a Madeira, something
Sweet,
like
yeah.
that.
I was almost gonna say there's a bit of lemon in there.
I was almost going to say like green grape a little bit, like that really just a little bit of acidity, not overpowering, but just as an afternote.
Exactly. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely get that acidity. I get like the grape must is there, and definitely some citrus, some lemons and on the finish. It's interesting for me. The arrival is very sweet and fruity, and then it shifts quite quickly into the finish where some of those more savory and sour notes come out.
Mm.
It's a real
You'll get,
Jekyll
like-
and Hyde whiskey. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
I'm getting like kiwi in a hayfield.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that.
Mm,
I love the discussion around it.
yeah.
Well, it's such a different experience because this is only the second Hazelburn I've ever had, and the only other one is a 10-year very basic thing, and I've always been pretty underwhelmed with it. It's all right, nothing funky, but you know, it's 11 years. But with the single cask, with the higher ABV, it brings so much more to the table. It really wants me to branch out and try some more Hazelburns now, I think.
I think the fact it's a recharred hogshead might go a long way in helping develop all the flavors. And there's a great transition between nose, palate, and finish. And I told you to think about funk. Is this funk or is this just good?
This is just good.
Yeah.
It's just good.
Fun.
It doesn't strike me as much as like, to me, like you said, think about what funk means to you. It's something that's out there, something very unique, something abstract. This just tastes like a really good whiskey with a ton of flavor profiles that I enjoy, but not necessarily something that I couldn't see coming from a different distillery.
Mm.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Paul.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm totally off base on that because there are definitely some unique tasting notes, but overall, if you told me this was from somewhere else, I wouldn't doubt you.
Vince says a dusty feeling and taste, and that's where the funk is for him. That's interesting because the dusty feeling and taste is usually associated with like old sherries, very dark ones, combined with sometimes a small time of fermentation, to give it a bit more ester, and bam, it hits you in the face.
I found that
that's-
a drop of water to this really brought out some nice caramel and vanilla sweetness that made me feel like, okay, yeah, this could be an ex-bourbon hoggy. But on the finish, it brought out this really cool kind of mushroomy barnyard kind of, instead of hay, now it's a little bit more like silage.
It's
If you
very wet.
Albertans know what I mean.
Yeah, the nose is completely the opposite of what you taste and what's the finish is. You like have 3 different kind of experience all through. Well, from my point of view, you smell it and you have the finish in the mouth. It's the taste or the aroma are completely different. That's what's funky for me.
That's
So,
nice.
Myke,
I think.
sorry, I was just going to say, so Myke, for those of us without a thesaurus in front of us, can you explain to me what you meant by that previous statement? Because I've never heard that word before.
So for the non-farm kids out there, so silage is a fermented green feed for feeding animals. So when you're making when you're making bales of hay, for example, you'll cut it as it is green, and then you let it sit in the field and dry to a certain humidity point, and then you bale it. Silage, you cut really green and you gather it immediately while it's still soaking wet. And then you dump it into a silage pit. Sometimes you'll add some enzymes and you allow that to ferment over the course of time. And then you're able to feed that to your animals throughout the winter because it doesn't spoil. But silage has a very specific smell to it. And it's real funky. Yeah, that for me is the difference with this dram with a drop of water and without, with just neat. Yeah, it was super grassy, fresh cut hay, that kind of thing. But with that drop of water, it changed that vibe significantly for me.
Cool, thank you.
Very wet. That's what I kind of know from what you said, and the finish is very wet, like you said. It's very different from the nose. All right,
I will say that is a damn good whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed that a lot.
Dangerous.
Very sad. There's only 240 bottles of that.
How many does Russ have?
You will have told me that it's a 55% ABV, and I wouldn't have trust you. It's like less than this on the palate. It's
it drank so easy and smooth, right? Like no heat, and usually 55% and only 11 years old. You're expecting it to be pretty fiery, and that was it. Just wasn't.
Because when you told me this is a starter, I was like, oh, 55, it's going to be hard. I didn't drink anything before, but no, it goes quite smoothly. So
yeah. And, maybe some of that comes from the fact that, what was it? Their new make is collected at 71 to 75%. So even over those 11 years, the Angels took a significant share of that alcohol. So maybe that contributes to the lack of heat and just that overall experience, because you got to think that stuff's coming off the still pretty damn hot. So it didn't drink hot, that's for sure.
Definitely not.
I enjoyed that very much. All right, let's keep this party going here. Now we're going to get into Springbank. So this is, of course, their best known whiskey in the line. This is their medium peated whiskey, 8 to 10 ppm in terms of the in terms of the peat levels. And it should be said that Springbank, I believe, is the only distillery out there that does all of their own barley. They get the raw barley in, they germinate it, they kiln it, they do the peating themselves in their malt house, whereas literally every other distillery out there buys pre-malted barley, peated or to their levels, or unpeated as whatever they need. But Springbank does it all in-house, which gives them a lot more control over the whole process. So Springbank is 2.5 times distilled. So they distill, they do their first distillation run in the wash still. The strongest 20% of that goes right to the number 2 low wines. And the other 80% is distilled again in the number 1 low wines. It's then combined with heads and tails from the initial wash run and distilled again in the low wine, number 2 low wine still. So you've got heads, you've got tails, you've got hearts going all over the place from still to still. I read an interview quite some time ago with the head distiller at Springbank at the time. I forget the name, but they asked him, "Why do you do it this way?" And he said, "Well, just because we always have." So, you know, maybe there was science to it back then, maybe not, who knows? But at the end of the day, it makes some pretty damn good whiskey. So let's get into our next whiskey here, which is another. This is a Springbank 11-year-old single cask, and this was matured in a Sauternes hogshead. So I'm going to throw this back to my man Nick.
All right, so and I have a French keyboard, and it's like a new iPad. It's always like rewriting stuff in French, and I'm trying to be understood by all when I write. Yeah, so that one is super interesting. I think there is clear Sauternes influence on the nose and on the palate, but for me the finish is nothing Sauternes, but like nothing Sauternes. And I get like on the nose super sour notes, like those candies, Coca-Cola bottles, and like I could name them all. There's a lot of candied lemon, very easy. Rhubarb, yeah, that's a very good one. Is it in English? It's rhubarb. Do you say that? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, very fruity, very sweet, very sour.
So just to be sure, it's fully mature in Sauternes?
I believe so. Yeah. Right, Russ? Oh, he's taking it out.
He's looking.
Because we will have the 17 years old Chardonnay that is 7 years matured and 10 years in bourbon, if I'm right. So this one is 100%.
That one specifies on the bottle that it's the Longrow you're talking about is 7 years in bourbon and then 10 years in the Chardonnay.
10 years. Okay, I just messed up the 2. Okay.
So
So
10-year finish.
This one only states refill Sauternes hogshead.
Okay,
so it's fully
matured. Oh yeah, great.
Which is a lot of time to be even for a refill cask. It's a lot of time to be matured, fully matured. In Sauternes, it's very sweet. It's a very sweet wine.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, because Sauternes is so delicate. It's a wine that is like you don't expect as much. It's like when you drink Sauternes, well, I guess you all drink some in the past, but it doesn't add as much flavors. So 11 years, maybe that's why they want it for 11 years matured to get as much as they can from those notes, or I don't know.
What do you get on the nose and palate, JP?
It's quite floral, I think, like
I get a lot of citrus. I always get citrus from a Sauternes cask. This one I'm getting some lemon, some quince, some blood orange. I always get a chalky kind of vibe. I often liken it to those chewable orange vitamin C tablets.
Do you notice that on the finish, Mike, more than anything? Or is it on the palate as well? Like the chalkiness. Is it more in the mouth feel?
Yeah.
Or- yeah.
It almost finishes a little bit dry at the end, I find.
Mhm.
That chalkiness, I see what you mean by that. But I almost get like yuzu for like, because it goes past sweetness almost to sourness the way like a grapefruit would, but a yuzu almost even more so.
Nice.
That's interesting. For me, this, like when you say chalkiness and it's very dry at the end, it feels like the fuck man, what makes your pea all red?
Beets?
It's
No, not beets. It's like you put the vodka and cranberries. You know,
Oh,
like it has kind of that super sweet, and then you
Yeah.
drink it, and oh my god, it's all dry and have like all this the sparkling notes on the tongue. You have this also with Luxardo cherries. If you have you all have that, yeah.
Yep.
There's like a lot.
Yeah, a little bit like syrupy, but still sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
'cause it is a thicker feel in the mouth for sure.
Oh yeah.
It's really oily
Yeah.
on the mouth, really coating. You get almost an effervescence on the finish.
Well, that's all Sauternes. Like Sauternes is very, very effervescent. I feel like it's sweet, but it's not a. For me, Sauternes is not a pure dessert wine. It's almost an in between in France between the cheese and between the like last blade of cheese and the dessert.
Can never have too many plates of cheese.
Nope.
You have the sweetness, like you said, say it's not a dessert wine. It's not like a Gewürztraminer or something like this, but
Oh,
you have the sweetness of. You can taste that this is white wine. It's not red. You don't have the
tannins.
the tannins and the thickness of. It's like. I don't know how to describe it in English. I'm sorry, I'm a French-speaking guy. So
Do it in French, GP. Do it in French.
Yeah.
c'est plus liquoreux en bouche, c'est plus coulant aussi. On sent le côté plus fruité du raisin blanc. Même, on pourrait dire que c'est un raisin qui a passé beaucoup de temps, qui a eu son temps de... Le goût qui me revient, c'est un peu comme un vin de glace, un petit peu, mais pas comme un vin de glace non plus. Tu sais, juste un petit peu avant, ils l'ont arrêté, mais tu as tout le sucré qui reste en bouche, qui fait que tu as cet aspect-là de cranberry, mais que tu as encore le côté... C'est comme si tu avais fait une super bonne confiture, mais juste sucré assez avec des canneberges.
All right, so I'll try to translate that. So he says that Sauternes is very syrupy, but more like it's fluid. It really flows well. It's not just like a thick, thick syrup. And basically, if I like sum things up, it's like you made a very good, a bit sweet cranberry jam. So you get like the good mix of sweet, yet a bit astringent, but not astringent, but a bit dry at the end. And it's very, very not.
It's well balanced. It's well balanced between the two.
Very good.
Yeah, it's a really nice fight between sweet and sour and bitter.
Je suis d'accord avec ça. I agree.
That's the beauty. I really like that whiskey.
Oh yeah. So I think I saw Russell like still has half of his bottle. So
Well, This didn't
Well-
sell out all that fast. So I guess out of all the tastings, and this would be the first one to not sell out, it's almost a blessing that this is the one. Seriously.
Well, I can
Well-
send you my address and I'll take care of it if you want.
Yeah, by all means.
I think I already helped with some of the leftovers.
You know what I'm gonna do is I will send out what I got left. I'll send you guys all another sample pack of this one.
Or
Because
we could just all go to Edmonton.
No,
Yep.
all people that showed up for this, I'm gonna send another sample pack to.
Oh,
you're
that's
doing
awesome.
Good, man. Appreciate it.
Because I do a lot of work to put these things together.
Yeah,
and
we
I
Thanks so
know
much,
it. Yeah.
man.
really appreciate everyone showing up. So,
Thanks so much, man. This
Because,
is amazing.
Thank you.
That's why you had to ship.
you know, Mike and Nick put a lot of time into it as well. And so, yeah. No, I quite like this. And as far as the funk is concerned, I get the funk on the nose and the finish. Like I get that diesel note that we're all familiar with
Mhm.
Springbank.
Funky fresh.
Yeah, this I would definitely agree. A lot funkier than the last for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the
Yep.
way I always describe Springbank is diesel and icing sugar.
Ooh.
Those are the notes that I consistently get with Springbank.
I remember that exact phrasing from the last tasting.
Yeah.
I better take a screenshot of who's on this thing before I forget.
Was
But I have to say this one, it's got that funk, but this has a real kind of fruit vibe that I don't normally get from Springbank. And I think that comes from the cask, comes from the
Mhm.
Sauternes. I think it's a really interesting addition to their lineup there.
I think it's very funny you say that because 110-hour fermentation is really long, and you usually do it to have a very, very fruity
Right?
spirit, just like Bimber. Bimber states it like we want the most fruit. We do 168 hours, but in Scotch, I don't think anyone goes past 120. And it's funny that, I'll jump the gun a bit, but for me the funk is this: you have super long fermentation time. You expect fruits. You expect like very soft peat because 8 to 10 ppm is less than Highland Park, which is already like not very peated. And I know it's not the same peat, but whatever. And you get something completely different. You expect things, and it's not what's thrown in your face.
I
And with
think
that, it's exactly that.
I agree.
I think it was great that you went the route of asking what funk means to everybody else, because it's going to mean something different to everybody. And good call on that, Nick.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks.
So
Thanks,
I'm a little
thanks.
bit curious, just because being a nerd, I recently went on this like rum tour down in the States, went to distillery, all this kind of stuff. And they explained a little bit more of the process of like distilling spirits in general, because ultimately it kind of all works similarly with different finishes and stuff, but the initial process very similar. One of the things that I really took away was like the heads and the tails, how much they cut, making like a more precise spirit or more kind of experimental spirit and stuff like that. So I'm really curious with whiskeys and stuff like that that have this really, really unique and diverse palate. Do you think they leave a little bit more of the heads and tails in, or how is that kind of going, if you guys can speak to that at all?
So from my understanding, in the distillation process, you're going to have, when you first turn your still on after it's been charged, the first thing you're going to get are your 4 shots. And that is, I'll see if I can remember my alcohols. That's going to be your methyl alcohol.
Okay.
That's the blind headache dead alcohol. You really don't want that. So the 4 shots, you get rid of that. Then you get into
It's
the
the first
heads.
5 to 10% of what you will distill at the first.
Yeah. Yeah. Because your methyl alcohol actually vaporizes at a slightly lower temperature than ethyl alcohol. So that's why it comes off first. So yeah, obviously you don't want any of that. That's why you got to be real careful with, amateur moonshine. But yeah, that once that stuff's gone, then you get into the ethyl, and the first thing you get is the heads, then you get the hearts, then you get the tails. And as a general rule, the heads and the tails are going to have compounds and esters in them that are generally thought to be undesirable in the distillation process. So, you're gonna find, those real kind of clean whiskeys that are out there. The Glenfiddichs, those kind of, I don't want to speak down about it, but those kind of basic space ciders that are out there,
Sorry.
right? Very clean, very clean whiskeys. So those, for the most part, will have pretty much nothing in terms of heads and tails in there. That's just going to be straight hearts. And that's going to give you the experience that you'd expect from that. As we saw earlier with the distillation process with Springbank, the heads and tails actually do go into they do continue throughout the distillation process. That initial spirit run in the number one low line still, the heads and tails actually go back in with that second run through the number two low line still. So some of those compounds, some of those esters, some of those notes that are in those heads and tails will continue through that distillation run and eventually go into a cask. So, you look at Springbank, for example, and it's generally thought to be a fairly dirty distillate, right? It's a dirty vibe to it. You think of other whiskeys that kind of have a dirty kind of vibe to them. I know, like, I've had some pretty filthy Brookladdies in my day. And Mortlach, they're another pretty filthy whiskey. And those are some of the things that I really like. I don't know if Mortlach or Craigellachie, if they use heads and tails as well. It's something that I'd certainly be interested to look into. But I think it's probably a pretty fair assumption to think that does play a role in the sort of experience that we get from Springbank distillate.
Cool.
What is
Yeah,
amazing is like it's all a bit of a mystery because distilleries don't disclose all the information,
Right.
which is kind of a shame because you can geek out. The more information you have, the more you can geek out. But at the same time, it's pretty amazing to say, "Oh, I wonder, I think, I'll try to look," and you don't have all the information. But everyone does things differently, except like you said, Mike, like big distilleries for like Glenfiddich 10, 12, Glenlivet 18, like the really standard stuff. But because, and it's like what the separation of heads and tails with the 8th or 9th step in the process. So depending on everything you did prior, you will get a different result. You can take exactly the same amount of alcohol once it's getting distilled, and you will get complete different result. Like, let's say non-peated stuff, just like fired, and it's not gonna be the same. And the more you look into new distilleries, new like family-owned distilleries and what they do, and they're gonna state, "Oh, we chose this barley because we know it does that, and we've experimented with that strain of yeast because it gives different results." And then, like, that's the whole process that is super interesting. But the separation is like, yeah, the 8th or 9th step. So depending on what you did before, you're going to get different results.
Do you actually know what they're doing with the first 5 to 10%? Do they just drop it in the air, or is it turn out to be a liquid like the middle methyl alcohol, the first the one that's not
Oh,
good for your
the
eyes?
4 shots?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to
So
that.
When
I'm
they're cut off this, okay. So when they're cut off the still, they go into a spirit still, which is where the cuts happen. And in each section of the spirit still, so the 4 shoots would come down, and then when it moves into the hearts, they just kind of like shift where the pour spout comes off and what tubes it's going into. And then the same thing with when you get to the feints. So what happens is it comes down, gets cut, and then it goes into another piping system. And that piping rolls, in the case of like the 4 shoots and the feints, they go together and it rolls back in through if it's a distillery that has multiple spirit stills and wash stills, it'll go back to the wash still and go back through that wash still for another time. So it always rolls back through step 1. So there's no wastage in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Because it's
That is really
it's
cool. Thank you.
very the only one that they really want to catch is, because just to make sure that I got the right numbers, is the cut between 64 degrees Celsius and 66.5.
Exactly.
That cut is stripped because that's your wood alcohol.
Mhm.
Once you get above 78.5, then you're running out of ethanol. And then once you hit 88 degrees, then you're dealing with isopropyl. And again, you don't want to keep that cut.
No.
So what they tend to do, a really, really good stillman can actually tell just by the color and the smell of their distillate. And what it smells like as it comes off depends a lot on the size and the shape of the still and whether or not it was steam fired or direct fired. Because when you're looking down on it, the things that change distillery to distillery, and not even so much in the modern distilleries, would be your water and your water source. Where is that coming from? Your barley sources. As Myke mentioned, you have a lot of barley is coming out of mass production units. So Port Ellen's, Maltings or something like that, provides a significant amount of the malt that goes out to the Scottish distilleries. So you're not necessarily going to get too much differentiation in your malt, but you might in your yeast packages that you use. Then it's the shape of your, is it worm tubs they go through first? Or wash
Line
stills?
arm.
Yeah, no, that's the line arm that gets into the stills.
Yeah.
But it goes through the wash backs with the yeast and then into the stills, coming off the stills, yeah. And then the worm tub versus the modern condensers will make a difference as well, because the size and shape of the still matters, and whether or not it's a worm tub or modern condenser matters, because the amount of copper that touches the distillate will change the flavoring profile. It takes out a lot of those things that people do associate with those funky distilleries. So distilleries that have shorter, squatter stills, or that have a worm tub and might not have as much contact to the copper as everything is being distilled and then cooled down as well. And that's the same with the size and shapes of line arms.
So it's very nice you mentioned that, Sheila, because I made a series of posts about Bimber this week on Instagram, and I made quite a bit of research on fermentation, barley, yeast, and stuff. And prior to the 60s, people did not drink Scotch. They were drinking Irish, Canadian, bourbon stuff, but Scotch, not so much. People all around the world, I'm talking. And suddenly there was like a boom in Scotch, blended Scotch, and there was a taste associated with that kind of spirit. And the SWA said, oh, we have a particular taste, so everyone's going to use the same barley, and everyone's going to enforce everyone's going to use the same yeast to have all the same flavors. And it's only recently that the SWA said, fuck it, you can use whatever yeast you want. But prior to that, yes, you had everyone bought the same thing all over again. So you had some factors that just didn't count in the taste because everyone did the same thing. Nowadays, I think it's a bit more open. I think the SWE like authorized some stuff because Scotch was losing ground compared to other spirits, like the whole tequila mezcal barrel use was like debacle. Why couldn't you use that? You can use brandy but not tequila. The fuck is that? Honestly, why? So it's very nice. Like the whole history of Scotch and Irish and stuff will get you going on why was it produced like that and why does it taste like that. And I really want to, like, if Russell, you can find a Highland Park 12 from the 1980s at some point. I really want to recreate a blind tasting of Highland Park 12, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010, 2017, plus something else that's just not that, and all blind, because it really puts things in perspective. There is a difference in taste. There is not a difference in quality, but there is a difference in taste because what was done in the 60s and 80s and 2000 is really not the same thing.
Well, it's not only that it's not the same thing. Once you get out of a single cask, every whiskey is blended. So there's the difference between blending different casks together to get your single malts, or blending Scotch with grains, or blending different distilleries together into a blend like Famous Grouse. So if you're looking at something like a Highland Park 12 or even a Glenfiddich 12 over multiple generations, you would have your master blender who is taking 2,000 barrels at a time, blending them all together to get a consistent flavor. And then you want that consistent flavor to follow month after month and year after year. But it does slowly shift. But if you're always drinking it year after year and generation after generation, you don't necessarily notice that shift in flavor. And when you do a side-by-side contrast across multiple decades, and it's not something that you've been drinking the whole way along, that's when you really notice the change between, you know, how it was in the 80s and how it evolved into the 90s. Unless you're doing a major shift like Bunnahabhain did when they went from being a peated whiskey to an unpeated whiskey, you don't tend to see huge differences across distilleries since about 1968 on, because it was Glenfiddich that came up with the first concept of a single malt Scotch.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, there's been some other distilleries that have made big shifts like that. I remember in I think it was 1995, Glengarry went from being a peated whiskey to an unpeated whiskey, and that was a pretty significant change. That they actually closed for 2 years. So the 95 was the last year of peated whiskey, and then in the new line came out in 97, and it was totally different. So that was interesting. I wanted to touch on a point that Dick made earlier as well, in terms of the SWA and standardization in production methods, beyond even the regulations, was just profitability. Distilleries have pretty consistently made choices that affect the bottom line, and with their eye to that bottom line, and maybe not necessarily to the flavor profiles. Examples of that are barley. For a long time, every distillery used exactly the same barley strain because it was the strain that would give you the most yield, right? More sugar in the barley means more alcohol in the wash, means more whiskey you can make with less barley. Great for profitability. Yeast is another thing that was almost completely standardized based on yield. That yeast is what converts the alcohol or the sugar into alcohol. If you've got more powerful yeast, it will make you more alcohol. So, again, not necessarily with the look to the flavor profile, but all about yield, all about profitability. So, that really did standardize a lot of the Scotch whiskeys that we've had. And it's interesting now, with a lot of distilleries experimenting with different barley strains. you know, right here we've got Springbank. You know, they every year they put out their local barley series, which is using barley grown in the Campbellton region, and they tell you what type of barley they used, so you can kind of start to get an idea of the different flavor and experience that you can get from different strains of barley. Bruichladdich, of course, is another distillery that is very focused on barley and other aspects of terroir. I know that a lot of distilleries are experimenting with different yeast strains. I think it was Balvenie that used a natural yeast last year or the year before to see what it would do with their distillate. So that'll be interesting. Or sorry, yeah, thanks, Vincent. Glenmorangie. So that, I mean, once that comes out, that'll be very interesting to see how that affects the final experience. But you know, I think it's exciting times that there's enough of us whiskey geeks out there that we're able to kind of push these distilleries a little bit out of their comfort zone, a little bit out of that focus on profit and more into giving us cool stuff to drink.
The question here is how the influence of the harvest of the grain you're doing the distillate with influence the real product when you know the barrel, and the maturation gives what 80 to 90% of all the flavor. How do you guess the yeast will influence that much of all the final product?
If I'm being honest, GP, like,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
Mike.
go ahead. Yeah.
That's where I'm gonna say it as this: it's all bullshit. It's technically not bullshit, but the marketing around it is bullshit. Because if you really want to do, like, if you say, like, the local barley series, okay, for Springbank,
yeah,
it like you market that you use local barley, and that's the main thing around the whiskey.
Yeah.
But if
that's
you
the
don't,
trend. That's
yes,
the trend right
yeah.
now.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's
If you
local.
don't-
It's perfect.
yeah.
It's
Yes, but if you don't use the same, if you don't state you use the same cask over and over again, if you don't always use the same casks, if you don't use the same yeast, it's hard to really know the influence of barley. And that's where I'd like this series to be more transparent and to experiment more. Like, put aside all factors. Like, try to always use the same thing and change the barley. Or just like they do with casks. At some point, they did the age statement. It was like, 12, 18, 21. Like, you see the difference in age. Then it was the cask used. We do a bourbon cask, and then a sherry cask, and then a Madeira cask. But why can't they do the same thing with barley and with yeast?
yeah.
And then
Okay.
cross everything?
My point here is, okay, I'm a scientific, okay, I'm a researcher. So my point here is, if you use different barley, but you don't use all the same cask, how can you do the differences? You have to have the same cask from one barley to the other to say you have the influence of the barley. If you don't have the same cask, how can you say it's not the cask, but it's the barley that gave the taste? You can't.
Yep.
No, that's an excellent point. And to go back to your earlier point about the cask, you know, giving 80 to 90% of the final experience. I agree that that's the case if you're using first fill casks, maybe even second fill casks. But you know, I'll just use Bruichladdich as an example because I'm familiar with it. They do their local barley series every year, where they will use barley from a single farm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you go to the website, they'll tell you what the growing conditions were on that farm for the year that barley was harvested, which is quite interesting. But when they're doing the local barley series, they're always using second, third, fourth fill bourbon casks. They're specifically trying to make the casks, they're specifically trying to minimize the effect of the cask on the distillate.
You said it, minimize.
Yes. And they do the same thing with the Bear Barley series as well, which is a completely different strain of barley.
Absolutely.
Again, they use third or fourth fill bourbon casks to minimize that effect from the cask and really let that barley shine through. You know, Springbank, most of their local barley, they do the same thing. They use multiple fill bourbon casks, and that makes me think back to the local barley. I don't remember if it was from last year or the year before, where they used the first fill sherry cask. And that was a good whiskey, but it was a fucking terrible local barley. It had nothing to do with barley. It was just a big sherry bomb. So, you know, I agree with Nick. If you don't do it right, yes, it's absolutely bullshit. You have to be very, very careful in the way you do it, or it is just marketing and it doesn't mean anything.
I think
It's nice. It's nice.
it's only marketing. From my point of view, you have a bad summer, you don't have any barley growing or very few, or you know the quality of the barley one year, and you're telling me that, oh, it's local barley, it's and the other year you say it's the same barley, but you have sun all summer, and you know the conditions are so changing. So I think it's only a trend to try to bring people to buy stuff because they're using some local barley. It's like I'm growing tomato in my backyard and I'm selling to you. So it's not coming from, I don't know, Gaspé or Ontario from my point of view where I am, but it's the same marketing aspect for me. So
Well, that's where Brickladish is nice, honestly, GP, because
okay.
it will give you all the information. Like Myke said, you go on the website, you
Yeah,
scan
it's
like
like
the QR
Kiloman
code.
too. They're doing the same thing.
Yeah. So having different conditions, and no cask is the same. You can take like 50 barrels or 2,000 barrels from Buffalo Trace the same year, the same use. They will not be the same. But stating, so we took this barley, it grew up like this. We blended it with another year, and stating all the information lets you know, okay, you did this for a reason. That was the purpose. That's the end result. You know, it's kind of, well, you're a scientist, so you know, it's just
every
giving
year.
the information is the important thing here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because even when you're talking about your casks, even when the casks come from the same tree, they're not going to leave the same flavor profile. So cask to cask, it's different. That's another reason why places like Bruichladdich will combine multiple casks, is to make a more standardized cask flavor out of the end product as well. So you're never going to fully get something that's repeatable across the board.
Yeah, that does make things certainly more interesting. Speaking of interesting, I've been looking at this next whiskey, and I will admit that I have perhaps already tried it, and I want to get to it. So I'm going to put a pin in this conversation. We're going to go back to it because I'm, you know, obviously we're all pretty knowledgeable here on this one, and we're pretty passionate about it. So I want to go back to it because that was some solid nerding out. But right now, I want to drink this whiskey. So Nick, tell me about it.
MC. Thanks, MC. All right.
I'm earning my whiskey.
Earn your booze. That's the hashtag, right?
That's right.
So 18-year-old single cask. So that's already a blast, right? I've drunk it whole before the tasting. I have to say it's that fucking good. It's fresh sherry, so you have a lot of sherry influence. What's nice, it's 46%. I love those older but not too old single cask that are low in ABV. The cask is usually super active. And what's interesting about this one is I was expecting something diluted, and the nose is not a 46% nose for me. It's blasting. It's way, for me, I have way more alcohol than on the Hazelburn. which has 10%, well, 9% over. Sorry, my math is wrong. So the nose is really not 46, and then you jump onto the palate and finish, and it's such an easygoing whiskey. I think if you can try to save a bit, save some a bit, and really do a side by side with the next one, the 8 years old, it's really two different beasts. I know it's two different beasts because there's 10 years difference and lots of ABV different, whatever. But it's, yeah, milk chocolate funk bomb. Exactly. You get a fondue, you know, fruity and chocolate fondue. That is exactly that whiskey. For me, the palate, you have apricot jam, strawberry jam, raspberry jam, fucking chocolate jam,
Yeah.
cranberry jam, mango
Cherry
jam,
blossom all the way.
cherry blossom, all the jam you can have, except it's not syrupy, it's chocolatey. Exactly like you said it, Russell. This is really, really, really good. Really fruity, and the peat is more, it's more earthy notes than really a smoky. You know, it doesn't make any sense, but it's not smoky, it's not harsh. It's really a layer, and you put everything on top. And for me, this is exactly the funkiness I like in a Springbank.
This is just a wow.
Yeah.
From
I
my
would say
point of
that the-
view, it's wow.
Yeah, I definitely get the funk, I would say, more on the nose than on the taste. But I can see what you mean by it.
It's just
It's
a beast.
fantastic.
It's like a soft beast, you know. I don't know, like a berger allemand. I don't know how to say it. Like, you know, the big dogs, and it's just a softie. You expect something a bit bigger, and it's a softie, and it's a curveball. You know what? It's a curveball. It's a baseball curveball. That's what it is.
The normal 18s, they have a split cask, right? It's like bourbon and then sherry.
Depends on the batch.
Okay.
I think in 2018 you had 100% bourbon cask. The Springbank 18 is not the most beloved Springbank out there. It usually gets the most hate in all the core range. But the 2018, I think I have it here. 2018 or 2020, I don't remember, is 100%, and that was super fucking good.
Yeah, with the 18s, they'll do different batches. They'll all have some bourbon. Some will have sherry, some will have port, some will have rum. They'll use all sorts of different casks for the for each batch.
Yeah, 2018, there's like 3 batch per year, 2, 3. 2018, 100% bourbon, but if you look at the batch released in May 2020, it's a 55 sherry, 45 bourbon.
So I have, which one do I have?
Where do we see the batch numbers or anything? I'm trying to figure this out. I'm curious. now.
Laser etched on the bottom of the bottle.
Oh, bottom of the bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
then
my 18 is a 2020, and it's 55% sherry, 45% bourbon.
that was a good one.
It's really good. You know, people, you know, I hear people shitting on Springbank 18 all the time. And, you know, certainly there's a significant degree of batch variability. But the bottle I have, I adore it. It is so good.
I think people bash
So
it because of the
Bradley, you're
price
gonna
point.
find it like down along here.
Okay. Am I blind? Probably.
You
Maybe.
have
on
to
the
have
back.
just exactly the perfect lighting to see it. Sometimes it's easier to if you backlight it.
Okay, I'm gonna figure this out eventually. What the heck? Maybe I just got a bunk bottle of Springbank and it's not actually real.
Some bottles just don't
Thank-
have it.
It's actually Famous Grouse. And that's another whiskey that gets a lot more hate than it deserves. I like Famous Grouse.
It's good. It's cheap. It's good.
Yeah, Famous Grouse and Chevek. I'll drink those anytime. The old tea bag.
So
Yeah,
anyone-
I'm significantly more sober now than the first time I tried this 18 single cask. And I mean it knocked me over the first time I tried it at Kent's, and now I'm able to kind of pick into it a little bit. Yeah, I love the chocolate notes. I get kind of that Wendy's Frosty, that kind of the chocolate malt vibe to it. But man, it's so creamy, and it still has that kind of dirty filthiness to it. That's a nice whiskey.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
If you're
So it's-
enjoying it, don't add water to it.
Yes.
You'll lose the chocolate and gain dirt.
Mm.
Don't gain dirt. But Mike, I will agree with you. I'm enjoying this much more today than when we killed that bottle.
Yeah, well, I had already killed like 6 other bottles at that point, so
Killed
I
a
was
lot.
more than a little lit up. That was an entertaining Uber ride back into the city.
I have to say, I was really disappointed that Drew forgot the rules and we didn't, all of those bottles came home with them. I'm like, seriously? I was hoping they would all get killed so that I wouldn't have to deal with them.
In Drew's defense, there was a lot of bottles.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and I
Yeah.
sent him with like 8 or something.
No,
Yeah,
I
there was a
brought 4.
lot to be
Oh, you
killed.
didn't bring them all? Oh.
Mike's in town. We're killing lots of bottles. We're rolling out the red carpet for Mike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like-
The next day was rough.
That.
There was also a lot of bottle pops.
Yes, the multiple black art pop.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, that's one for the record books right there.
Well,
You know,
I will
why
say
don't
if
we
you
just side by side 2.2
Yeah.
and 4.1? You know,
Thanks
as
for
you
the
do.
FOMO, guys. Thanks for the FOMO.
Hey, always welcome. You know, I kind of have a rule of thumb. If anyone comes out here, nothing's off limits. You see something you want opened, we'll open it.
I love that.
All right. Well, we've had the Dr. Jekyll. Let's get to the Mr. Hyde.
Yes,
Ooh.
sir. That's what I was trying to say. Just
Mhm.
if you want me to save some from this bottle, we should jump to the other.
Mhm. So here we have another Springbank Sherry single cask. What do you say, Nick?
And this one's like the two of them. Well, okay, first this one. It's young, and at the same time on the nose, I get super old, like old dust, library. It's musty, it's chalky on the nose. It kind of feels like a second or third fill sherry, smaller barrel, and like it's very old on the nose, and then you get fucking hit in the face. I have like a spicy, very spicy Asian dish on the palate. You get nuts mixed. You know those fancy Asian mixed nut mixed. It's super good. I have this. I have a lot of tannins. It's somewhat a bit dry, and I think the finish is super interesting. It goes up, down, and then up again. And I get a lot of Christmas cake, weirdly. Finish is nuts. Oh yeah, it's really nuts. And you know, like when you have like your subconscious thought about a whiskey, and you say, oh, this is old, this will taste like X and X and X, and this is young, it's gonna be. And I feel the 18 and the 8 kind of throw curveballs around, because you have some youthness in the 18 and you have some older feel in the 8. But then again, I'm not getting any fish nuts. Oh, not fish nuts. Like spicy Asian nuts mix. But yeah, side by side, it's, if I were to taste these blind, I would not know which is which. In terms of age, in terms of like, definitely it's sherry, but I wouldn't say first fill or recharge, or it's really hard to say what's what.
I mean, Springbank's small enough that when it says it's an 8-year-old bottle, there probably isn't a ton of older stuff in it. But you really can't go by an age statement on a bottle either. Because, you know, if you look at Compass Fox 3-year-old, it's 3-year-old because they put a tiny bit of 3-year-old into much older whiskey. And that can always be the possibility in other bottles as well.
But it's being this is a
Single cask, yeah.
Yeah. So that's it.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
one's interesting. Like on the nose, as you said, it doesn't come off as young. On the palate, it's
Very
rowdy as
cask,
fuck.
actually.
Like it comes at you hard. It's hot. It's sharp. But the umami to it is just fantastic. Like it's so savory.
Yep. That's why I said like it's hard to blind, no information. I wouldn't know what each were. Yeah, it's Springbank. Yes, it's sherry cask, but age unknown, cask refill unknown, ABV unknown.
Interesting. With a drop of water, the nose shifts significantly, and I get like wet wool and cheese. Speaking of funk, let's see what the palate does with some water.
Almost getting like a burnt rice, you know, like the crispy bottom of like what's that Spanish dish where they fry the rice with all the fish?
Paella.
Oh yeah. Like that little crispy ricey bottom. I'm getting that with a bit of water.
Water really opens this one up,
Yeah.
like a lot.
Yeah, that's when you want to add the water to, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the Hazelburn 11, which I thought was a very dynamic dram, this is probably the most dynamic that we've had so far as a roller coaster whiskey. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
You could dig a lot of stuff out of this one.
Yeah, with the water, now that I'm into the finish, it's gone like full balsamic on me.
But even
I
with
love when whiskey does that.
even with no water, the finish is like you have
Yes.
a big spike at the start and it just doesn't want to end. It's like it's very long finish.
Almost never ending, JP.
Yeah,
Like, I'm still tasting it.
yeah, me too. Take 2 sip and I'm like, okay, is it going to? No.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one is, it reminds me of my 5-year-old kid. It's just all over the place.
I know exactly what you mean.
Mhm. Yeah, this one's fun. This one's a really fun whiskey.
Yeah.
That's for me, it's the funkiest we had. We
Yeah.
have.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think like if I wanted to just kind of sit on my front porch and contemplate the world, I think I'd probably pull the 18 single cask. If I want to sit down and experience a whiskey, I'm going for this 8.
Absolutely.
Good call on trying
Good
them
call.
side by side and saving a little bit. That was nice.
Yeah, well played, Nick. That was
Hey, that's
nice
why
one to do back to back.
What you do, Nick. It is what you do. And thank you guys. Thanks so much, Nick, for all the work you put in. And Myke
That
is
8 is delicious. Wow.
With
Hey, we're
or
not-
without water for the side by side. I didn't add water to the 8.
I added
Lord.
water to the 8 and it changed
Yeah,
it
but-
quite a lot.
But for the side by side with the 18.
Oh, I would drink the 18 neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, at 46, it's pretty rare I had water to those, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm
All right.
I'm speaking about the 8. Did you add water to do the side by side with the 18, or you
Oh,
just go
no.
straight for the 2 of them?
I went straight.
Okay.
I usually go right.
For me, I for all of the whiskeys, I drink them neat first, and then I
Yeah,
add
sure.
a drop of water.
Okay. That's what I'm doing too. So
Mhm.
just to be sure.
Yeah,
Especially with
that is
Single
a
Cask, yeah.
super fun whiskey. I like that one a lot. All
I
right,
always
who's ready
just
to
go
get their
straight.
smoke on?
Oh boy, can't wait.
Let's do it. All right, let's go back.
Oh.
Longrow here. So this is Springbank's heavily peated line at 50 ppm. And with Longrow, they just do things relatively simple for Springbank. They just double distill it. First in the wash still, and then in the second distillation is in the #1 low wine still, which again is the still that uses the worm tubs. So that does play into it. They collect their new make at 68%, which I believe is the lowest ABV for all of them. Yeah, that's the lowest entry ABV for all of the styles that are done at Springbank. So yeah, this is where we get to the smoke. We're going to start things off with core range Longrow, their 18-year. Russ, I assume this was a 2020. Is that the right release?
That's the latest release. It's in a tube, so I'm pretty sure it's like 2022.
Interesting.
It's definitely not 2020 because it just came out and I just got it. It's when they switched over to tubes. So
Okay.
So
sorry.
am I the, just quick reflection, am I the only one that's super annoyed they dropped like everything, box, tube, whatever, and they changed the label for the Longrows? They're more beige than white now. Am I the only one that's like,
My OCD doesn't like any change like that. So I think
okay, good. Okay, that's good. I'm the same.
yeah. And tubes, give me a break. Come on now.
Yeah.
I like the bloody tubes. Well, the metal tubes.
Yeah, I
They're
like
getting
the
rid
metal
of
tubes. And I know they're getting rid of it. I know they're doing for the environmental, but I do have to admit there is a price point that it better come in a fancy box. Like,
Yeah.
And those boxes take up so much room.
I know, but if I'm dropping that much money on a whatever, an Austin Martin's piston, it better come in a fancy box.
Saving the environment, Drew.
So I didn't realize your name was Rohit.
No. It's
Drew is not buying those
no,
bottles.
I'm not buying those bottles.
Wow.
But I mean, if I was,
Yeah.
Oh, I missed the Godfather. Where is he tonight?
I don't know. Where's everyone else? It's okay. You know what? Out of all the tastings I've done, I think this is the most involvement we've had, and I'm quite liking the small group.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
am too. It's nice
too.
that nobody has to
Yeah.
worry about muting themselves or whatever. Just like jump in,
They
have a
would
good time.
want to say this small group. We're talking. Everyone's engaged.
I find it crazy. You guys have sunlight right now. That's and
well, it's,
Not for much longer.
it's only
It's
7:30
black here.
for us is darkness.
Yeah.
Darkness is spreading.
Darkness.
All right, so
So just a
The-
question here. Am I the only one that doesn't have any engraved dates on my bottle of 18 or 21 that I've bought since the 3 years ago? Or
You're not
No,
even
I
the
haven't.
only one in the group that's doesn't have one. Bradley doesn't have.
Yeah, I've been looking. I swear, I'm going insane over here. I'm glad it's not just me.
because it's like with the SRQ, we don't even know which batch we have anyway. So because it can be 1 or 2 or 3 years back that they just have the
Well,
arrival of the bottle. So
That's what I'm
sometimes you're
wondering
like,
too.
which year is that? And you cannot put a date on them. So it's
Did you get your 18 from the SAQ lottery last year?
yeah.
Yeah, that's when I got mine as well. So
Okay.
So
I
it's a
think it's the
2020.
2021 edition. If I,
No, it's 2020.
Yeah,
it?
2020,
Okay.
because on the Springbank 21, it was a 2020. So I was, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
But
And the
nothing
last
was
lottery, I
on
think,
the
was
Longrow
19.
bottles from the same, it was a lottery at this time. So was it, is it 21, 20? I don't know. Well,
Which one?
Longrow 21.
Oh, I think
Oh, that's 2020.
last year was all 2020.
Yeah, I think
That's
the
what-
SAQ lotteries were 19 and 20.
Yeah, it's always a year,
2
Yeah,
years.
way
yeah.
back. Yeah.
a year back. Yeah.
If there's one thing to be said about the SAQ is you can pull some gems. Just takes
Yeah,
3
we
4
can.
years to get them.
Yep.
Cheap,
But
it's
like,
cheap.
you never know. It's like a Kinder Surprise.
This
Mhm.
year, man, I got a late shake all particular 14 years old. It was
Okay.
released like 4 years ago.
Wow. In a
Yeah,
way,
that's like the
probably
LCBO. It's like, hey, look what we found in the back corner of our warehouse. Fuck it, put it on allocation.
Yeah.
Oh man. Anyhow, so
Okay,
Russ,
sorry,
I
yeah.
can't find a 2022 batch of the 18, so I'm assuming if it's the tube, it's probably going to be the 2021. So I've updated the cask makeup to that. And Nick, talk to me about some smoke, buddy.
Man, that one, like on the nose, I think it's exactly what I expected for a Longrow, 18 years old at 46%. I have humid, hot hair, burnt log, applewood, for the charcoal to smoke. Very, very, very classic. Not saying there's not much to go on, but I wouldn't say disappointed. It's just, yeah, it's exactly what I expected from. And then very balanced, yes, exactly. And then I tasted it. I have exactly nothing to say about the palate. I am just waiting for flavors, and then bam, I get hit right before I swallow. And for the finish, I have barbecue sauce. It's super meaty. I have those jerk wings I love so much. I almost have jerk poutine, very spicy, very earthy, very dirty. So overall, I think this is really interesting. There's a huge difference between the nose and the finish, and the palate is just a freaking teaser for me. I'm just waiting. And then it's all coming on. So I love this one.
the nose doesn't lead much to the palate at all, does it?
No.
Nope.
This
Nope.
is interesting too, because
Definitely.
the nose and the palate are both fairly restrained, but then it's the finish. It just comes at you hard.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
definitely get the barbecue sauce. I get a lot of cumin actually, which is nice. Drew and Sheila with the warm butter. I'm gonna go with like salted because there's a really nice brininess to this. It brings
Yeah,
that savory note.
I'm like
There's a
Yeah.
floral leather on the nose.
like Red Lobster. You're about to dip your
Oh, fuck
cheddar
yeah.
biscuit into the warm butter.
Oh,
It says
yes.
That's why I said the cheddar biscuit.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree.
you're dipping your cheddar biscuit into what's left from the shrimp scampi, and your wife's looking at you like you probably shouldn't do that, but you're like, I'm just gonna.
So I have a story like this. I'm at my parents with my girlfriend, and so everyone's French, like from France, except my dad and I. We're more Quebecois, and we have croissant, right? And I open it, and my dad does the same, and we start putting some croton on the croissant, and just my girlfriend and my moms are like, "What the fuck are you doing? You cannot do this. Like, it's against the law. Don't do it." And we ended up not being able to eat croissant with croton, which was such a disappointment.
What is croton?
Kind of it's
It's like meat that you're cooking very slowly to have like a it's pork meat slowly cooked that becomes like almost like a jam,
Mm.
Greaves.
if I can
It's
say.
Greaves. Yeah. Greaves.
Greaves.
Greaves. No, I'm using Google Translate. It's a Québécois pâté, like the pork pâté.
Yeah.
Spread.
Pate, yeah.
But it's
Pâté,
not the
fuck, man.
same as
No.
pate. That's
No.
No, but it's giving me the mental image. It's like kind of
Because
like
Oh,
pate
yes,
is
yeah,
like
yeah.
slick on a
bacon jam,
Mm.
pork jam, kind of.
Yeah, pork
I'm-
jam.
Nick, I'm on my way to Gatineau right now. You're just gonna show me. That sounds
Wait a second.
fantastic.
I have some in the fridge.
Yes. Yes.
Do it.
yeah, show them.
Russ is gonna send more whiskey samples. We need Nick to send out the samples of this stuff.
Want some fagua?
Oh, foie gras.
That's it. I'm ordering food right now. What an epic tasting! Like this is that 18. I love that. I don't know.
Yep, that's just
What else?
nice.
The 18. The mouth feel. I mean, I'm a huge. What do we got here? I don't know what that is. That does not look that appetizing.
I know it's fucking good.
Yeah.
I agree. You must taste that.
And in English, it's called creton.
Hmm.
Cretons, like a CRETONS.
I want some in my life right now.
It's so good.
I need to get some
good.
DoorDash from Ull.
But like Russell was saying, this is like I could drink this 18 years old daily, and I will be happy for life.
Yes.
This is pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree. And what a way to finish than this 17, Mike.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I did not have anything to do with this order. Or maybe I did. So yeah, this 17, this you know, when there was talk about including this one, I was very excited. This is one of my all-time favorite whiskeys. I'm on my second bottle of it. And if we switch over to it, you know, there's only 360 bottles made. I'm halfway done number 2. So
Yeah.
to anybody who hasn't had a bottle of this, I'm sorry that I'm being a greedy bitch about it. But if I have a chance to get it,
Order and order
I'm
to
gonna take
find.
it. I will take it. So yeah, as I said early in the tasting, Big League Chew. Take it away, Nick.
Man, this on the nose, it's like they didn't want to make whiskey. It's like they were doing jam, you know, soft berries, and they just grill them on top of peat. So that's like big nose, super good, super sweet. There's you definitely feel the earthy and dirty notes. Then the palate really kind of threw me out of my game because it wasn't as peated as expected. Definitely not. It's more on the sweeter side, bit winey, tropical fruits, some slight charcoal, but nothing big and bold like the finish from the 18 years old. And then boom, you're hit again. It's dirty, it's peated. You get like some really goudron, freshly poured. I'm gonna Google translate that. Is tar, like tar pit, like it's
Tar.
yes, exactly. It's just been poured, and you want to step on it just to leave your mark. Very good, very interesting. You have a bit of everything. Everything has its moment, I think. You get bigger peat, bigger berries, very sweet, a bit of tropic, and instead of being a whole experience, you have a lot of peaks on a mountain. Every flavor shines at some point, and that's what I loved about this one.
Yeah, this one's a whole mountain range.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Am I the only one that for the first time I've seen finish for 10 years? It's like,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
this one's a weird one. This one's less of a finish and more of like an actual double maturation.
Yeah.
Which you really don't see all that often. And I love that they actually included that information right on the
Mhm.
label of the whiskey. And I'm trying to go back through my memory bank here and see if I have tried any other whiskeys that were matured or finished in Chardonnay, and I'm struggling. I can't remember
17
anything
Years.
out there in a Chardonnay cask. I don't know if anybody else here can think of anything. With whiskey maturation finishing, we see obviously a lot of bourbon casks. That's pretty
Yeah.
much your standard. I see a lot of sherry casks.
Sauternes, and I've seen a few with Sauternes, but
Yeah.
Chardonnay,
Well, you see a lot of
actually,
red wine
yeah.
finishes as well, both for peated and unpeated. Obviously Longrow red, that whole line is red wine. There's Deanston has done a lot of red wine finishing.
Oh, Glenmorangie.
Brookladdy, same thing. But white wine,
Glenmorangie has a Chardonnay?
It's about the
Glenmorangie?
only one. Yeah, Glenmorangie has a Chardonnay cask
Yeah.
finish.
That's the only other one I'm
You're
seeing as
right.
well.
They do. I haven't tried it, but yes, I have seen it. That's a good
Oh,
point. Has anybody
Virginia
tried it?
Distillery. Yeah,
No.
it's not. The problem with it is it's 40%, it's diluted.
It's just super
And-
basic.
Yeah, because it could have been super good. Like with most Glenmorangie, I think lots of potential. Just yeah. And I find Virginia Distillery Co. has a Chardonnay cask finish.
So is that an
also
American
see-
single
Yep.
malt?
Yep. Single malt American.
Interesting.
I also
Interesting.
see one from a distillery I've never heard of before called Ninkasi. But apparently they do a Chardonnay finish 46%.
Ninkas?
Ninkasi. I'll send the link because I've never heard of this before. I'm seeing like 2 links to it, but it looks like it does exist.
Interesting.
That-
I have an
That's
Edredor.
Scottish?
I have an Edredor that is done in Chardonnay as well.
Ooh, that would be
Oh.
interesting.
Okay.
Glenmorangie's 2021
Yep.
25-year-old is as well.
Okay, maybe I'll pass on this one. Don't have the budget.
Well, I was looking, but I
Not
couldn't
many, though.
remember what their
Any.
Well,
All right, Russ,
that's
take
the
some
one.
notes here,
Yeah,
buddy.
next
Next tasting, Chardonnay.
Grand
Chardonnay
Cru is
finished
just
whiskeys.
extra champagne.
Yeah, well, that's because Grand Cru is a
Yeah.
brand of champagne. But I couldn't remember because I know that's a white wine, but I don't think it's a Chardonnay.
Yeah, white wine doesn't pop up certainly as often
Oh, it's a
in,
Sauternes.
in whiskey manufacturing, which is it's interesting. But yeah, this whiskey it's a special one. For me, I get bubblegum, specifically grape Big League Chew bubblegum. And that's just not something that I usually get in a whiskey. But the sweetness and the smoke, 17 years old, so it's still got smoky hit, but it's mellowed down quite significantly.
Mhm.
But just the journey this whiskey takes you on is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Remember the first bottle I got was actually open, and it was from a buddy of mine in Calgary, and we did a misfit trade. He didn't like it. I don't know what's wrong with him, but he had 2 drams out of it and he traded it to me for something else. And boy, did I ever win that trade.
Well,
It's
at the
it's
start, you have the big diesel diesel taste.
Hmm.
You have this spirit. But after all, you have all the other elements that came out of. It's such a great. I have 2 bottles waiting to be open right there. So
Don't wait
But-
anymore, my friend.
I have so much to drink right now.
Oh, I know. I know how that is.
I can relate.
We all know how that is.
Hey GP, I have, if you want, I have a bottle of Springbank 18 with a stamp on it. I can trade you against that one. No?
I'll think about it. Okay.
Got a clear stamp.
Let
good.
me sleep on it.
Does anyone have a favorite at this point? Is there
Hmm.
one that stands out that didn't actually live up to the hype?
I will be completely honest.
Oh,
Not allowed. Shut up, Ames. I think it's pretty well documented how much I enjoy whiskey that was done in Sauternes casks. So I had very, very, very high hopes for that 11-year-old Sauternes. And
disappointing, hey? Pretty disappointing.
out of the 3 Springbank single casks, it was I'm not going to say it's disappointing. I'm not going to say it was a bad whiskey. It was neither of those things, but it was my least favorite of the 3, which really surprised me.
I agree.
That's the
I'm-
first one we
The
Um,
first Springbank.
had. First one, that's what
Yeah.
it was. Yeah.
I'm gonna be a real renegade and say that my favorite was the Hazelburn.
Yeah.
First
okay.
one?
Yep, the first one.
Okay.
Like, I haven't been disappointed by anything. I like them all. If I could, I would own several of each, including that
Yep.
Sauternes. But the Hazelburn surprised me the most. I was not expecting it to be that good, that original. So maybe not my favorite in taste. I would say the Longrow 17 is the best. But I buy several cases of that Hazelburn, and it's really surprised me how good it was.
I
would-
came in expecting the Longrow 17 to be my favorite, and it was. So
I agree.
that was not a surprise there at all. But the interesting thing is, out of the other 5 whiskeys, I would buy all of them. And I think the only thing that would influence which bottle I pulled on any given night was my mood, because these whiskeys are so different. They're all such different experiences. And to realize that they all come from the same distillery is amazing.
Incredible. That 8-year, what an underdog story, you know? Like,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
expect nothing.
Absolutely.
You expect nothing, and you get a wild journey of whiskey wonderland, and it was outstanding.
It had no business being that good.
No, it didn't. My favorite of the night, I have to go with the 18 and the Hazelburn.
Hmm.
Obviously, I'm a sucker for Pete. The 17, I found a lot of the same profile in the 11-year Hazelburn that I see in the 17. The 17 is deadly, like it's
Mm.
incredible. But I got a lot of the same profile out of an unpeated version of what I thought was the 17.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, that Hazelburn punched way above its weight.
Yes.
Way above.
Well, maybe if you have put it in the middle of the tasting instead of first one, maybe I will go with the Hazelburn. But for me, the 17 is a no-brainer. This is my favorite by far. But for the others, the funkiest for me, and what a surprise! What was the 8 years old?
Yes.
It's like I didn't expect much from a 8 years old. You know, sometimes they're good, sometimes it's just okay. But that one was like okay, yeah. And the 18 beside the 8 years old, you're like, you have much more wood in the 18 years old, so you're like, okay, it's a little bit older, but side by side, blindfolded, it will be hard to say. So the 8 years old was my surprise. My favorite was the 17 years old. Of course, it's
I guess
just
I asked that question because it's like, was there really a loser in this? Like, there's not
No.
no.
one that stood out that was like, nah. I think they were all pretty good.
I would go out and buy all 6 of these bottles without hesitation.
I agree with you, Mike, that I had higher hopes for that 11 year.
hmm
I will say that. Doesn't mean it was bad. It's just I expected a lot more.
But on its own merits, it's still a very good whiskey.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know what? Again, with every Springbank, at retail, it's incredible value.
hmm
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Unfortunately,
incredible.
retail is climbing.
Yeah. Yeah, but when you take every retail, I mean, sure, it used to cost like $80, and now it went to 120 and 140 and or now 170. But since everything has gone up, it kind of stays like it has the same value compared to all other. The real question is it still worth it?
Yeah.
I know some people moved on from whiskey to brandy or mezcal, which is super, super hot right now. It's kind of
Like
the
Hansel.
That's right.
Hansel.
Oh,
He's so
yeah.
hot right now.
Exactly. No, but exactly. It's exactly that. I think they're wrong, but that's another question. But
If it means
still the
less
best.
people trying to buy whiskey, that's fine. I'm okay
Yeah,
with that.
exactly. But like all things going up, except the Carcheras line, I think it still keep that insane value if you can have it at the SAQ lottery.
Mhm.
But yeah, Springbank, I think the funk, and yes, they make 3 different lines of whiskey, but for me, the real funk in Springbank is the diversity they put on. I love Highland Park. I'm a huge Highland Park geek, but it's always the same kind of things. Springbank is doing super different things in Hazelburn, in Springbank, in the Longrow line. We could add the Kilkerran line because it's really connected to it. And that's, for me, that's where the funk is. You never have the same profile twice.
Is it the only distillery that has 3 kind of lines like this? I'm just speaking loud
No,
for
Brook-Laddie's
myself.
got Brook-Laddie, Port Charlotte, and Octomore as an example.
Okay,
Um,
but it's always Brook-Laddie. It's not like you have the Brook-Laddie Octomore. You know, it's not like Springbank, Hazelburn, Longrow.
no, I mean, Port Charlotte's Port
Mm.
Charlotte. They don't call it Brook-Laddie.
Octomore is Octomore.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have the Brook-Laddie on the side.
In every
can-
single Hazelburn, like it says right on the side of the bottle,
Springbank. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That's
So
it.
it's
That closed the case.
even on the long row, it says
Mm.
Springbank. But I hear what you're saying, JP, and yeah, there's not many people that have multiples quite to the varying degree that Brook-Laddie and Springbank have, and to an extent Kilkerran.
hmm
The reason Kilkerran doesn't necessarily get introduced into these tastings from this group is they don't really release anything that's of significance. I mean, it all looks, outstanding, but they don't release any single casks or nothing to the degree where we would be like, hey, let's do a tasting with this Kilkerran 8 port, right?
No, I totally agree.
It's still a very valid part of the Springbank story, absolutely.
Well, I don't think they're putting too much out that's all that fancy right now because they haven't been around that long. You do have Springbank shuts down for like 2 weeks and they walk across the parking lot to Kilkerran to run it for a little bit. So they're producing at such small amounts that the bottles that do go out, there's just not a ton of them right now. And they haven't really been around long enough.
Two brothers that broke away.
Incredible story. What's going on, like with Kilkerran? I feel like you could have a whole tasting based on the Kilkerran in general, and I feel like Sheila, you would be a good. I talked with Dave from Whiskey Drop, and the stories he has to tell about Springbank is just outstanding. Like, talk about ghetto. Like, they do things old school there.
Well, I mean, our little piece of peat, we're not home tonight, so we can't show it to you, but our little piece of peat was from Springbank.
Yeah.
Doing his light fingers.
Yeah, I just walked in and stole it, and then some American saw me and he was like, oh, I'm gonna go get it. He got caught, like hardcore got caught and yelled at him.
Had to put his feet back in the pile.
Yeah.
Put
All right, folks, I
down
just wanted to quickly say I gotta head out, but thank you so much for the hosting, Myke and Nick, and putting this
Great to
on.
see you,
Russ.
Bradley.
Yeah,
It was awesome. Really, really, each and every one of you guys made this such a fun night tonight with the small group, everybody interacting. This, honestly, I think this is probably my favorite tasting I've done with NWO. Just so small, it's just intimate. It was awesome. So each and every one of you guys, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I hope you guys have a good
Glad
rest
you
of
could
your
join
night.
us, Bradley.
thanks to
Thanks very
you.
much.
So the next question is, should Renegades of Funk Volume 3 be about Bruichladdich?
Be with what? Sorry?
With Bruichladdich. Can we do a Bruichladdich Renegades of Funk?
Okay.
Of Funk?
I don't know
Or
if we
what?
have anybody in the group who knows anything about Bruichladdich, so it could be tough.
It's a really underrated distillery.
Is it good? So the big question is it good?
No,
the,
it sucks. Nobody should ever buy Bruichladdich.
the question is, Bruichladdich,
Sounds like a
is
lie.
it funk?
Yes.
The
Has to be
early
funk.
Bruichladdich, when they opened back up in the when Mark Rainier bought it back, they have such amazing funk at that time period because they had horrible wood and just random spirits sitting in warehouses that they needed to then recast. And the stuff that they put out at that time period, and they were pumping so much out, just trying to like make the money to keep the distillery going too. They have weird and bizarre and amazing whiskeys, but not whiskeys that you would necessarily think of as like a standard whiskey at that time period. Mark Rainier and Bruichladdich did huge amounts for bringing forward the whole concepts of like secondary finishes and some of the crazy finishes that they finished in. I mean, they were doing Chateau Yquem, they were doing what Viva Saltes years before anybody else was really doing it. And the market is just full of these bizarre and wonderful bottles that they've put out.
Well, yeah, they had a combination of terrible casks and Mark Rainier who could get insane French wine casks from anywhere. So it was pretty cool. They did some very cool stuff. So did we ever figure out what funk is?
No.
Well,
It's personal to everybody, and I'm going to say I don't actually think Springbank or anything in the Springbank Royal hits my funk button.
oh, hot take.
It just doesn't really do it.
It's like a
'Cause
psychological
I always
funk.
think of like Glenbergie and I think LeChec when I think of funk. That like wet leather shoe that's your dog is chewed on. is always an element of funk to me.
Glen Scotia.
Yeah, well, Glen Scotia's Campbellton.
Yeah, I know
'cause it's
Glen.
just up the road.
Glen Scotia. I get
There's
a
some
lot of
amazing-
Glen Scotia, Drew.
They have some fabulous like bacon flavored weirdness that happens every once in a while. They'll put out a bottle.
Don't talk about Glen Scotia. This is
I
going to
don't.
go on YouTube. After I stop recording, we can talk about Glen Scotia. God damn it.
I gotta go in.
Well, you can go back and edit.
Has
Have
anyone
Murray
had
McDavid.
No,
Myke Ames.
you were just asking about
Yep.
funk. To me, the funk is something completely off in the left field. I love all of these, but I wouldn't really have put any of them as the like, oh my God, that's so funky. I've never come across it.
Yeah, that bacon Glen Scotia though, that hits my, and the trout in a trash can. So trout in a trash can is that the sherry finish? 19-year-old
Yeah, I think
Lecheg
so.
a few years back. They had this Lecheg bottle that the nose was like fish. And it was weird and bizarre and it was briny and it wasn't your typical Lecheg. That to me is funky
Yeah,
bottle.
not like it was fit. It was like rotten fish guts was the nose.
That's nasty.
Yeah.
But it was such a good bottle. It was like,
For me, the funk, at least when it comes to Springbank, you know, like I said earlier, it's that diesel icing sugar combination. But I think really the funk, there's an additional element to that, you know, I think I've been kind of trying to find tonight. And it's a little bit similar to what I found with a lot of Bruichladdich bottlings, and it's that kind of, I don't know what it is, sour cream or
the
yogurt or
lactobacillus.
cheese. Exactly, Sheila. And I do get that from Springbank. There is that kind of cheesiness to it, that funky old cheddar kind of thing happening. And I'm certainly getting that from a lot of the whiskeys here tonight. JP, what's your funk, buddy?
Well, it depends a lot of different. If we speak from tonight, the funkiest I'll tell you about was it was the Sauternes for me. The second one, when you were smelling it, tasting it, and the finish, you had 3 different kind of experience throughout all the tasting of this dram. So that for me is funky because you're expecting the expectation from what you're smelling, and then you're tasting it and it's completely different. And the more you let it go, it's completely another dram. So this is funky for me.
I like that explanation, you know, out of the norm funk, you know. I appreciate that. Thanks, JP.
I agree. I might get shot, but I think one of the funkiest whiskey I've had recently was the Ardbeg fermentation.
Well,
That's a weird one. Yes, that definitely had some funk to it.
It's fucking overpriced. Yes, absolutely. But it was fun to taste. It was different from what Ardbeg does. It was fun. It's a good whiskey. I see Russell is already taking notes like, no, we can't have this guy host anymore.
don't air.
And for so many different reasons, has any one of you had the Carnmore Glentoshers 4 years old? No?
I'm sure Drew and Sheila have.
That one's really familiar.
Yeah, it's really familiar.
That one, I have a picture. That one was funky because I was not expecting that kind of flavors from a 4 years old, 46%. sherry punch and Glentoshers, which I had never heard of at the time. And funk is fun. You have fun in funk. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be different. It can be different from what has ever been done. It can be different from what a distillery usually make. So saying Springbank is funk doesn't make a lot of sense. Some bottles from Springbank are funk, but you can have funk in any distillery. Well, not Macallan, but that's a different take. But yeah, funk is different. And I really like what you said, JP. Like the Sauternes might not have been as we expected, but it was definitely like different.
I think we just need to be careful to not have people think that funk means that there's something wrong with it. It just means that it's interesting and it's different and it's unexpected.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah,
why
it's not rotten.
that's what
funk,
you're looking
it's-
for.
Yeah, it's not funky like it's rotten. It's funky like it's Bootsy Collins.
Oh yeah. It's like disco, funk is disco. It's not bad. It's just
Funk is good, in
flash.
my opinion.
Yeah.
George
Yeah.
Clinton and the Parliament Funkadelic.
It makes
For
you
those of a
move like
certain
you
age.
never did,
Isn't it funny when
Exactly.
Isn't it funny when
Dig.
you're giving explanations about tasting notes to people that are not necessarily into whiskey, and you give these tasting notes, and some of them are clearly sound unappealing, but at the same time to you they're completely appealing. It's like diesel. Like, how could you put diesel into a note and at the same time say I love it?
Mm-hmm.
But
Ashes on the beach. Yeah. Like,
Licking an
Wet
ashtray
dog.
and smelling grandpa's old socks.
Yeah.
Awesome
Wet-
whiskey
yeah,
notes. I'm on for
Wet
that.
dog,
dog.
tar-soaked rope, creosote.
but it's the best notes.
Yep.
Yep.
As an avid whiskey drink consumer, you're looking for that note that's just out of left field. And I think at this point,
Mm-hmm. I think many of us, certainly on this tasting, are at a point in our whiskey journey where I'm certainly speaking for myself, but I'm not necessarily looking for the best whiskey anymore. I'm looking for the most interesting whiskey.
Mhm.
And the most interesting whiskey is a lot of the time it's not the most popular whiskey. It's not the whiskey that maybe the mainstream whiskey buyer would even think is good. But I want something that's interesting. I want something that's different. I want something that's going to make me kind of sit up and go, damn, that's interesting. And I think we had some of those whiskeys tonight.
yeah.
That 8-year-old
yeah.
for sure made me sit up and take notice.
Mhm.
That Hazelburn got my attention. I wasn't expecting as much out of that as I got. So, got some attention tonight.
Definitely.
So nice polls, Russ. You picked some beauties.
Absolutely.
a half years in the making, just
Yeah,
gotta
there we go.
Arizona.
Oh yeah. So Russell, you were talking about like these notes that are not appealing to non-whiskey drinkers. And prior to COVID, I went to someone's house, like very far away in Quebec. And like it was a couple, and she put out a tasting for her husband's birthday. It was all beginners, like all people that had not a lot of experience. They used to drink always the same thing. So I had stuff like Blanton's Green and stuff you can't always find on shelves. Some you can. And we had Irish, single malt blend, American bourbon, Canadian, everything. And I finished the night with a Lafroy quarter cask on purpose. And everyone was spitting and saying that was trash. Like they did not like it at all. Which I understand when you used to drink like Glenfiddich 12 or Johnny Walker Red Label, Lafroy can be off-putting. And this one guy had never drank whiskey before, like except Jameson shots. And he went on and told me like, what's Lafroig? I love it. And he bought like, I think 7 or 8 Lafroig online at the ACQ website, on the ACQ website. It was like, that's so fucking good. And everyone was like pouring the glasses in the drain. And all they wanted was the Lambton Green and, you know, like easier stuff. But this guy was all out on Lafroig. He spent like $800, $900 that night buying bottles online. It was
Birth
crazy.
of a Pete head.
Oh yeah.
Nobody said drinking whiskey was going to be easy.
Oh yeah.
Nah,
It
if it was
was
easy,
fun,
everyone
man.
would do it.
Yeah. Lafroig, beauty.
Yeah, for sure. Well, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.
And this will be the end of the YouTube experience. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, guys.